Micron stock to $2,800. Let's talk about the numbers that can get us there. There's a lot of bullish numbers pointing that it's actually relatively easy for Micron stock to hit $2,800 in the relatively near future. We also have bullish news from SpaceX and Nvidia. We're going to jump into those headlines as well. This has to do with SpaceX's Terafab, which a lot of headlines you'll see are scaring people, saying this is bad for Micron. I actually argue quite the opposite, and if you dig a little bit into this, it's pretty obvious that this Terafab being built out by SpaceX is actually super bullish for Micron in the next couple of years. And you've probably heard Nvidia has struck a $500 billion financing deal. We're going to talk about that, how this plays into Micron. Obviously, guys, if Nvidia is building out financing for startups and smaller companies to invest into AI infrastructure, obviously that's going to drive demand for chips, specifically from companies like Micron, right? You can't buy Nvidia chips without using high bandwidth memory. So let's jump into that, guys. Like and subscribe as always. Let me know in the comments, are you guys already invested in Micron, or are you considering investing in Micron? I've been making a lot of videos on the channel about Micron, and I've been curious actually to know, are most of the viewers watching my videos already invested or just considering investing in Micron? Personally, I am invested in Micron. In my portfolio, I'm building out the position here. If you guys want to see what's in my portfolio, if you saw on the screenshot there, portfolio is up just over 1.2 million. If you want to see what's in the portfolio, what I'm buying, when I'm buying, and why I'm buying, join the private group there. Link is in the description. So first of all, guys, I want to, kind of call out the fact you're going to see a bunch of bearish headlines, right? Micron ran up. The market is skeptical. People are taking profits. There's a lot of headlines saying things like, Micron is cheap. The market is admitting it's trading at a relatively cheap valuation. Specifically, that forward P we've spoken about a lot at about 6.5, which is extremely cheap. You'll see a lot of headlines like this saying, yes, Micron technology is cheap, but we're still not buying, right? And basically, the bear case there is that it's cyclical. It's cyclical, it's cyclical. We've heard about that a million times. But quickly, we're going to talk about, first of all, what's the numbers between getting to a $2,800 per share in the relative near future. We'll take a minute just to talk about that. Then we're going to talk about why all of that cyclicality, we've talked about it a million times on the channel, that's just kind of BS at this point for at least the next couple of years. And these bullish signals, like we're going to go over here from SpaceX and from Nvidia, these are just a couple of reasons why, right? We continue to get more and more bullish signals as to why demand will continue to skyrocket, continue to stay strong, even going into 2029, 2030, when that initial ramp up period might be over. They're still going to cycle through those chips to maintain those data centers, right? These chips don't really last more than 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And these headlines really are just the latest bullish signals, right? We've talked about hyperscalers not only signaling they'll continue to spend on AI infrastructure, also in recent earnings, hyperscalers showing that they're already increasing revenue, increasing ROI from AI infrastructure spend, which is really breaking one of the biggest bear cases lately, is that companies are not making money on the infrastructure, right? We're already seeing specifically the cloud providers reap massive revenues and profits from AI services, right? So all of that on top of the latest bullish signals from Nvidia and SpaceX, we're going to talk about that in just a second, why this Terafab from Elon Musk's SpaceX is actually hugely bullish for Micron, even though you're going to see a ton of headlines saying the opposite. Check out this headline. Elon Musk's newest factory is 15 times the size of the Pentagon. Micron and memory stocks should be terrified, right? Everything is fear in the market as they're trying to drive retail out of these chip stocks, right? Kind of like they did with Nvidia back in, I believe it was 2022. Retail started selling Nvidia, the price crashed, and the price eventually skyrocketed, as you know, over the last 4 years. I believe Micron is up over 4x just in the last 2.5 years. But let's jump into the numbers, guys. First of all, as of making this video at the moment, Micron is trading at 868. Okay, and if we look forward, and I love this Simply Wall Street, if you guys want to check that out, it's a great website. The premium version is really amazing. But essentially, analysts are agreed that at a midpoint, EPS, earnings per share, in about 2 years, August 2028, will be, give or take, $169 per share, right? That's not the bear case, it's not the bull case. It's really the base case right there in the middle. So keep that number in mind, $169 per share. Now, what does Micron typically trade at from a price to earnings ratio valuation? Historically, and you'll see on your screen, a historical median PE, now that's a median, not the average, so it takes into account the outliers, is 16.8. So if we take $169 per share, which is a relatively conservative estimate for the next 2 years, multiply that by 16.8, we get $2,839 per share. So there's the simple math. Now, could these estimates be wrong? Could earnings per share plummet? Yes, of course that is possible. But we've talked about it at length on this channel. We've seen tons of signals that demand is not going to plummet over the next couple of years. Everything, even the analysts are agreeing that over the next 2 years, demand will continue to tick up, even if just modestly, right? So those are the numbers between why in the next 2 years we could very reasonably see $2,800 per share for Micron, right? Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. Now, as far as SpaceX and Nvidia, again, SpaceX is building out this massive Terafab. In a nutshell, what their plan here is to build a completely vertically integrated factory where they could build the entire AI chip stack from top to bottom, right? The AI compute, the memory, the complex packaging, the wafers, everything. Now, I have my skepticism as to whether or not that's possible in the next few years. I mean, Elon Musk tends to overpromise, underdeliver. He's been promising, self-driving cars coming next year for the last 10 years. And personally, I think this is going to take longer to come to fruition than he says. Now, you could disagree with that, but either way, that's not the thesis as to why this is good for Micron. A couple of things here. You're going to see articles like this saying that this is bad because essentially SpaceX is going to develop its own in-house HBM, which is the high bandwidth memory, which is the highest margin memory chips available right now that Micron develops. And this is going to eat into Micron's profits. Now, I'm going to explain to you guys exactly why this is not the case. And if we hop into Gemini here, we'll see that yes, they're going to create memory chips. Yes, they're going to create the AI chip stack, but they are not likely to compete with HBM manufacturers in the near future for a couple of reasons. One, they're acting as a market, instead of acting as a market competitor, this is really going to feed their internal business, right? Just really to feed their own chip stack, first of all. Second of all, because this is expected to take years, look, even if you know what you're doing, if you've researched Micron and you've researched HBM, which if you're watching this video, I'm assuming you have, you understand that HBM specifically, this high bandwidth memory, is something that is so complex to make that even the hyperscalers are not even attempting to do this, right? Google is making its own AI chips, compute chips. They're not making HBM. All of these hyperscalers, they're not jumping into that. Nvidia, they create compute. Are they jumping into HBM? No, they're not. Why is that? Because it's extremely difficult. It takes a lot of extremely complex IP. It takes a lot of extremely expensive infrastructure, and you have to know what you're doing, right? We've seen China coming out with DRAM manufacturers, but they haven't been able to get HBM going. And pretty much, even if you're in position like Micron is, where you know exactly what you're doing, you have the expertise, you have the track record, you have the infrastructure, it takes a couple of years for these companies like Micron to build out this capacity. Now, when you think about SpaceX, that has no experience doing this, and no offense to SpaceX if you guys are SpaceX investors, but they're coming in from the outside trying to learn how to do this from the ground up. Now, you would imagine this would take more than 2 or 3 years, which it's going to take Micron, right? So when you couple the fact that even if they're able to achieve this, it's going to take much longer than 2 or 3 years, which puts us at, 2030 and beyond, In the meantime, they are going to be building out this fab with AI stacks, and guess what? The compute is actually the easier part to develop, right? Not saying it's easy, but it's much easier than HBM, right? That's why you see more companies making these AI chips. So what's likely to happen is these AI chips will hit the factory lines in the SpaceX fab much faster than their HBM will, right? And what is that going to do? That's going to create further short-term demand for HBM, right? So in a nutshell, we don't really consider Elon Musk and SpaceX's Terafab to be a true competitor when it comes to the HBM space, which again is the highest profit margin sector for Micron. Now, of course, there's DRAM and NAND, and that could potentially get cut into slightly, but we're talking about a 2, 3, 4 year window at best, right? So, the money is being put into the Terafab. The Terafab is going to be built. Will it take longer than expected? Yes, most likely. Will the compute come online faster than the HBM? Yes, very much most likely. And will this lead to even more demand for Micron and their memory chips than we have now? Yes, most likely, right? Then we also have bullish news from Nvidia. If you guys have been, not living under a rock, you've heard the headline saying that Nvidia lined up a $500 billion deal when it comes to financing, as CEO Jensen Huang tells CNBC his chips are investable assets. Now, in a quick nutshell, essentially Nvidia is working with private equity, right? So they're going to use private debt to fund this $500 billion. It's almost like a line of credit, you could say, right? Now, how exactly does this work? And obviously, in a nutshell, Nvidia has been accused of circular financing, right? Essentially creating its own demand for its own products. They're trying to move away from that. They're trying to find ways to increase liquidity, increase access to funds to diversify their customer base away from just hyperscalers. Right? Hyperscalers have the funds. They make hundreds of $billions per year. They can spend that on CapEx. They can issue, Google issues 2% of their shares, of outstanding shares. They raise $100 billion. It's insane. But when it comes to smaller companies, right, Nvidia wants to continue to diversify their customer base, but these smaller customers have liquidity issues, right? They have a hard time accessing debt. So essentially what Nvidia has done is they have partnered with 6 major Wall Street asset managers to mobilize over $500 billion in third-party private capital. This framework aims to finance the massive, capital-intensive global build-out of AI data centers, power generation, and compute infrastructure for Nvidia's customers. Now, the partnership is currently structured through signed MOUs to create independent, dedicated pools of financing at competitive rates, pending final binding agreements. Now, the initiative treats AI compute hardware as AI factories as a standardized, sovereign-grade, long-term investable asset class, similar to utilities, toll roads, and commercial real estate. So, I'm going to be honest here, as someone who does practice risk management in the portfolio, I'm going to be honest with you guys. You don't get to a $1.2 million portfolio typically without having some form of risk management, right? So when I see Jensen Huang saying things like, well, AI chips are basically like investing in utilities. It's like investing in ComEd or, Berkshire Hathaway, who's, powering the grid. I get a little skeptical, some red flags come up, right? So what exactly is he trying to say? He's saying, well, these chips are going to hold their value. People typically say these chips can last anywhere from 3 to 7 years. If you end up using the older chips for inference instead of LLM training, you can drag these out to maybe 6, 7 years. So because of that, they could last a little longer. But really, what's at the crux of this is that Nvidia is backstopping. Again, you've heard a lot of these backstopping deals, which is a little bit of a yellow flag there. I think they had one with OpenAI where they're backstopping like hundreds of billions of dollars. This is, I think, a smaller backstop, but Nvidia is backstopping 25% of the $500 billion deal. So Nvidia removes the primary fear of rapid depreciation by guaranteeing a residual value backstop of up to 25%, which is $125 billion. So essentially Nvidia is getting these private equity investors to put up $500 billion in debt. And one of the ways they're getting them to do that is by Nvidia saying, hey, we will back 25% of this, right? So we're putting a floor on this. Even if things drop, we're going to be there to backstop this to protect you from the downside. Now, you know, I have my qualms with that. I don't think it's a perfect situation. But one thing I will tell you is Nvidia is backstopping this, not Micron. So what does that tell you? Nvidia is at the front of this, taking on a lot of the risk, and Micron is going to benefit, right? Because when Nvidia is creating more access to liquidity to smaller and mid-sized companies, that's going to continue to fuel demand. And of course, you can't power these AI chips and these Nvidia chips without high bandwidth memory, guys. We've talked about this a million times at this point. And the target beneficiaries of this will be capital, which will flow to the neo cloud providers, to enterprise buyers, and to sovereign nations to secure low-cost debt and financing to purchase Nvidia chips and infrastructure at a scale that exceeds individual corporate balance sheets. And again, this is Nvidia taking on the risk here, but of course, this will increase demand for Micron. So I think that is extremely bullish. And you know, if you're watching the channel, guys, you understand at this point, but I quickly want to show you a little diagram here. You know, you have logic chips made by companies like Nvidia. This funnels down to Taiwan Semiconductor. I'm sorry, they design the chips and TSMC creates the chips, and they package these with memory chips from Micron and SK Hynix, right? So TSMC kind of puts it all together with their complex packaging. And this is why you see here, it's very linear, right? As you increase compute needs, you increase memory needs as well. And actually a lot of research is showing that as compute complexity increases, memory needs are increasing exponentially, not just linearly, right? So we're gonna have to see how that plays out, but it's very likely that over the next 2, 4, 6 years, you're actually gonna see memory demand go up exponentially relative to compute, right? And you could look that up. This is, you know, backed by research. There's a good chance that with these needs being coupled, that you're actually going to see a massive increase in demand when it comes to memory chips from Micron. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, guys. Do you guys agree with the bullish news that, you know, SpaceX and Nvidia cutting these deals will actually benefit Micron? Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. Do you agree that based off of this EPS estimate of 169 in 2028, if we do a very rational 16.8 PE, we could easily be at a 2,800 per share Micron in about 2 years? The market is very, very skeptical, guys. The market is still pricing in cyclicality. We understand that, right? I think that's pretty clear at this point. It's all about cyclicality with Micron. And if they show over the next 12 months that they're breaking that cyclicality, do not be surprised if Micron rubber bands to the upside, guys. And that is why I am building out a position in my portfolio as well. So let me know your thoughts on that in the comments. Again, guys, if you guys want to see what stocks I'm buying, why I'm buying them, and when I'm buying them in my $1.2 million portfolio, join that private group. 7-day free trial. We talk stocks. You can see what I'm buying. It's a pretty fun group to hang out with. But appreciate you guys joining, and I'll see you on the next video.